Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to beautiful Ormond Beach, Florida. It is Wednesday night. It is another edition of Grassroots Motorsports Live, presented by CRC Industries. I'm JG Pastor Jack. Tonight, we are going to have a really good time hanging out in the shop, learning a couple of things about welding. Actually, you're probably smarter than me. You might not learn much, but we together are going to go on a journey and try and expand our skills and try and do a couple of fun things. We'll get to all that in due time. First off, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight, folks. You know what we do at the top of every show. If you're watching us on YouTube, I got you over here. If you're watching us on Facebook, I got you right here. I want you to go down, throw a comment in the comment section. Don't care if it's even English, don't care what it says. Just let us know you're here, and that also lets Facebook and YouTube know you're here, and we really appreciate that. Throw us a like if you're on Facebook, and subscribe to our channel if you're on YouTube. We're just about to hit another milestone in subscribers, so you'll get first notice of all the content that goes up. We had a great review of the Hyundai Veloster N a couple weeks ago. Real fun Halloween show with some features from our $2,000 challenge last week. All kinds of cool stuff on the show every week, so that goes up on YouTube immediately after the show and even during the show, like tonight. All right, here's what we are doing tonight, folks. We are going to answer that age-old question of, is a TIG welder right for me? I want to preface all of this by saying this is not going to be a learn to TIG weld show. If you want to learn to TIG weld, I'm not your guy. You want to learn to make chicken wings? You want to learn parrot care and feeding? Yeah, maybe ask me a couple of questions. You want to learn to TIG weld? I'm not your guy, but I want to address tonight the unskilled among us, the people out there who maybe have not been welding their entire life. They're hobbyists. They're doing some light fabrication in their shop. They got a track car, they got a race car, they got to fix stuff once in a while. We're going to answer that question. Do I need to go out and spend several hundred or even many thousands of dollars for a TIG welder? I've taken that bullet for all of us tonight. We're going to figure out if an idiot like me can do this, probably you can do it too. So we're going to find that out tonight. And I am very, very excited to be along. Oh, our friends from Auto Books, Aero Books are here watching from Burbank, California. While we are at it, we should mention that they are proud supporters of this show. We are proud supporters of theirs, folks. They are the world's greatest bookstore in Burbank, California. Tens of thousands of books, magazines, DVDs covering the entire history of automobiles, race cars, street cars, everything in between. Check them out on the web at autobooks-aerobooks.com. If you can get out to Burbank, it's worth it because they have all kinds of great live events out there, author signings, cruise-ins. If you can't, check them out online, autobooks-aerobooks.com. And of course, our good friends at CRC Industries. Check them out online, crcindustries.com. Even better, check them out at a retailer near you. Buy some brake clean, buy some spray lube, buy some lithium grease. It's good stuff, and they give a little bit back to our hobby. All right, let's do it. Hi, everybody. Welcome aboard. Let's get going. So first off, let's ask the question, how much welder do I need? And what kind of welder do I need as a hobbyist, as somebody doing track days, maybe somebody, running a spec Miata, somebody running, a car, a Lemons car that might get bashed around once in a while. So talk about the stuff you're going to be fixing. Most of you, I'm thinking, are probably going to be familiar with MIG welding. There's a lot of good low-cost MIG welders out there. We have a MIG 175 from Eastwood down here. Actually, several months ago, you may have seen us set that up to work with aluminum. MIG is a fairly novice-friendly process whereby you're creating an arc. Let's draw a simple diagram. Wow, I just saw from our friends at Auto Books that Ed Iskandarian was at their shop last week. That's the kind of cool stuff that goes on there. So we're trying to stick two pieces of metal together. Here's piece one of metal, here is piece two of metal. And again, this is going to be review for 95% of you, but I need to talk myself through this just so I don't completely embarrass myself. I want to stick these two pieces of metal together. Easiest way to do that is to melt these two pieces of metal, fuse them together. I want to alter them at a molecular level. I want to allow the molecules from one of those pieces of metal to flow into the other, When they solidify, it will essentially be one piece of metal. So how are we going to do that? We're going to pass an electrical arc through the metal. So if we're using a MIG welder or a TIG welder, we're going to have an electrode up here. This will be grounded to earth. There's my ground symbol. Not a very good ground symbol, but you guys get the impression. So we're going to throw voltage through here. It will arc here. The heat will melt this area. It will fuse together. Boom, we got one piece of metal. All welding works in the same way. It uses electricity to create heat, which melts the metal, which fuses it together. Now, if you're melting two pieces of metal together, you're also going to need to add a little bit of metal. Otherwise, you're going to have a valley in there. You're going to lose some of that metal, so you need to add a little bit of a filler. With MIG welding, the filler is added through the actual gun itself. There is a sacrificial, the electrode from the gun is also a sacrificial filler. It continuously spools out from the gun. With TIG welding, a little bit different. You're creating the electrical arc, and you are adding filler to that arc by hand, essentially. It's much more analogous to something like soldering than it is to MIG welding. So what are the differences? So yeah, Dinesh says unless it's oxyacetylene. Well, with oxy, you're still with gas welding. You're not using electricity to create heat. You're using a gas flame to create heat. So except for the method of the heat, yeah, you're still melting metal to create one thing. So with TIG welding, unlike MIG welding, you are much more in control of the arc that you're using. So let's look at a couple of the components we're actually going to be using for this. Now this is an AHP Alpha TIG 201XD. Chris, get a good shot of this, because when you do, I can write this off as a business expense, and that'll be awesome. So look, I did not go looking for a TIG welder. It's something I've always kind of wanted to learn. I was going to borrow one. You know, some of the other people at work have them. These came highly recommended on our message board. Several of our people at grassrootsmotorsports.com on our chat room, our forum, have used these before. They were having a sale, $750 later, boom, here it is in my house, shipped. If you've watched the show at all before, you've seen that, you know, I am not the most skilled MIG welder. I will do it when I have to. I'm much more of a self-tapping screw and JB Weld guy than I am a welder. But I need the ability to stick two pieces of metal together, and I need the ability to stick aluminum together as much as I do steel. We've got a couple questions coming in from YouTube. I want to get to those before they get too far behind. Casey's watching from Holly Hill tonight. Welcome aboard, a local. Applejack says someone's been watching Welding Tips and Tricks. Yeah, I've got several good welding tip sites I want to give you later, because again, you're not going to learn anything from me unless you're somehow dumber than me, which I feel bad for you and anybody that loves you. But we do have some really good sites that basically these are the videos that I've been watching to do my little proof of concept here now, and we'll get to those in a little bit. So here's what we're looking at here. It's a 220 volt AC/DC TIG welder. Produces a square wave AC, which we'll get into that when we get into the aluminum. But we're first going to do a couple little demos here on DC. So let's kind of set the machine up and look at the component parts and look at what we're actually dealing with. We'll go ahead and flip it on. So when you're welding on DC, if you're welding steel, if you're welding any sort of ferrous metal, you're going to be welding on DC, on direct current. So you're going to be producing an arc that essentially flows in one direction the entire time. Now we can see that our torch here, our electrode torch, is plugged into the ground, and our ground, our clamp that completes the loop, is plugged into our positive. So electricity is going to be flowing from this torch to, in this case, it'll be our welding bench, through our workpiece to our welding bench. It'll be completing the circuit in this direction. So all the heat is going to be put directly into the workpiece, and the voltage, the DC electricity is always going to flow that direction. So what are our key indicators here, our key figures that we're looking at when we're trying to create the arc? Well, it's amperage. It's how much energy are you going to put in to this base metal to melt the metal, create a molten puddle, move that puddle along, fuse it together. So we're talking about amperage. Cool thing about TIG welding is the user controls the amperage in real time. That is the big difference for me in basically MIG welding versus TIG welding. So you've got two adjustments here for the amperage, and you've got essentially your start amps and your main amps. You've got a foot pedal that controls the spread between here. Start amps is going to be essentially what the amperage is when you make contact with that foot pedal. As soon as you activate that foot pedal, that's going to be the amperage going through the electrode. Finish amps is essentially a throttle stop. It's going to be the maximum amount of energy that's going to go through that workpiece. So that would essentially be full throttle on your foot pedal. So how much energy do you need to melt this metal? It's going to vary. It's going to vary on a lot of factors: thickness of the metal, the actual carbon content of the steel, the actual molecular structure, the grain structure of the aluminum you're using. If we're talking about rules of thumb, a fairly good rule of thumb that I've found so far is 1 amp per thousandth of inch of thickness is going to be about where you're going to start. That if you're just looking for a place to get things going, that's a fairly good place to start. Again, these are not best practices. These are not ideal situations. This is going to get you going, and we're going to figure out if this is something for you. So the first piece we're going to play with tonight is this little piece of that's like a 1/16 inch piece of steel. So we are going to set our maximum amps. It's like what? That's like 125,000. So we're going to set them a little high. We're going to set these about 140 thousandths. So we're going to have a little bit of extra headroom in there that we can maybe back off if we want to. We're going to show you a close-up of actually how this creates the puddle in a little bit, if I can successfully strike an arc. But we will get that going in a little bit. Next thing we have to do is we have to set up our torch. Turn this off to do that so I don't get electrocuted. So this is going to be the actual thing that creates the arc. This is a tungsten electrode. There are several different types of tungsten, or several different variations of tungsten electrodes that you can use in a TIG welder. We're using what's called a lanthanated tungsten in this demonstration tonight. It's about the most generic. If there was an all-purpose tungsten, lanthanated is probably going to be one of the more forgiving, one of the easiest to kind of learn on, switch back and forth and do things. There's 5 or 6 different types. Each of them have their own specialized ideal use, and again, beyond the scope of this discussion, but you're going to either use a lanthanated tungsten or a thoriated tungsten for 80% of your welding. Just remember, if you're using a thoriated tungsten, it is radioactive, and radiation does not actually give you superpowers, unless cancer is a superpower, but be very, very careful when you are using thoriated tungsten. Wear respiration apparatus when you're grinding it, and just to be very, don't play with it like I'm playing with this. No, this is not radioactive, Katie. Katie's worried that I'm going to kill her. Let's get to a couple of our questions here before. So Kevin wants to know, do most entry TIG machines have a just works setting and allow me to play with the other settings as I get more experienced? Yeah, so that's a great question, and that is one thing that I looked long and hard for when I was actually shopping for this. The answer is TIG machines that have a just works setting are light on the options. They generally will you will lose control once you gain skill. So what we're doing tonight is I'm kind of giving you some very ballpark generic just works type settings. This is I've barely touched this machine since I set it on these, and I've actually done very little welding. I've just kind of done function checks at this point to kind of make sure everything works, and laid a couple of very simple beads. But the settings I'm going to show you tonight are as close to an out of the box let's just build my skill type setting as I think we're going to get. Let me so yeah, Greg says Eastwood have a guidelines decal to help noobs, and Autobooks has some really good welder's handbook. There's a lot of good shortcuts out there, and the settings I'm going to show you tonight are again as close to generic as you'll ever use. So let's prep this tungsten a little bit, because this has been in the machine and gotten flattened off a little bit. Now, one thing I'm finding is the actual prepping of the tungsten has a lot to do with your personal feel of the welder. I am finding that I like a very sharp, very sharp tip on the tungsten at about a 15 or 20 degree angle. That's actually probably a little bit steeper of an angle than some people will tell you to sharpen your tungsten at. Chris, follow me over to the bench grinder here, and we'll get this sharpened up. So we put our tungsten in just a hand drill, and we're gonna spin it against the grinding wheel. And we're going to put a nice sharp point on it. And actually what we're going to do, so that's about what we're looking for. What we're going to do is we are going to flip this baby around, and we're going to sharpen both ends of this tungsten, because invariably we're going to screw up one end because we are just learning. So we're going to sharpen both ends so we don't have to constantly be walking back over to our bench grinder to sharpen tungstens. We can just flip it around in the machine and we are good to go.
They're telling you should have a dedicated grinding surface just for the tungsten.
I will address that. I will where's our, okay, yes, always have a dedicated grinding surface just for the tungsten. Let me address that, Gregory. I agree in theory. I also agree that when you're welding aluminum, you should clean it as good as humanly possible. While you're developing your skills, if you shortcut a few of those things, it's not going to kill you. Is it best practices? It's not best practices. Can you get away with it and quickly recycle each tungsten and be welding again and be developing your skills? Yeah, you can. So best practices would include having a dedicated grinding surface, preferably a very sharp grinding surface like a diamond grinding surface, or just dedicate a wheel on your grinding wheel to it. Now, actually, one thing I'm finding more important than actually having a dedicated wheel is the grain structure of your grinds. You want to grind this tungsten in line with the direction that you're going to be using it in. So you don't want to lay it across the wheel and sharpen it this way. You want to lay it with the direction of the wheel sharpen it that way, because that's going to create a very fine grain structure, a structure of microscopic scratches in the tungsten. Can actually control the way the arc flows. If you've got those scratches, those ridges running parallel to your tungsten, can throw the arc in a bunch of different directions. So you want to have your sharpening going in the same direction as your tungsten. So Scott wants to know, can we explain how to weld parts attached to a car without shorting out the electronics? Yeah, that is a that's a great question, and especially if you've got an aluminum car that you're welding with AC on, and you're grounding it to the body of the car. Without knowing anything better than this, I'm going to say you want to disconnect as many of those electronics from the grounds of the chassis. You don't want to have them grounded to whatever you're grounding your welding device to, because that's you don't want to create any kind of common voltage between your weld and those electronics. So yeah, pull the ECU out, pull the BCM out, pull as much of that stuff out as you possibly can. Yeah, Greg makes the point that DC won't hurt anything unless you've got weird stuff going on. Yeah, because you're not continuously changing that current. It's a little bit lower current. But yeah, whenever you can isolate, especially using AC, the better. Okay, let's get our tungsten set up in our torch here. In order to create the arc, in order to have the arc be stable, we need to create an atmosphere for the arc. We need to create a nice, stable, inert atmosphere for the arc. So we use argon, or argon, as you call it here in America. And what that does, it creates a very inert atmosphere. It allows that arc to jump without igniting any of the other chemicals in the air. Oxygen burns very easily, can create flames that will shoot in different directions. So we're using pure argon for any kind of TIG welding that we're going to do. This ceramic cup here is sort of the guide for that gas that flows out of here. When we set our electrode up, again, we're talking rules of thumb here. You want your electrode stick out to be about the same as the diameter of the end of the cup. So that is a fairly good place to start. You basically want to get good gas coverage over the end of that electrode. I'm going to move my iPad here, and we're going to see if this fancy. Oh, by the way, TIG welding can produce some janky chemicals, so it's best to wear respiration. I'm not going to do that tonight, but generally, if I'm in here practicing, I'm going to be wearing a respirator behind the mask. I'll give it to yeah, Katie wants to wear the respirator. I still need the ability to talk while we're doing all of this. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're just going to strike this arc, and we're going to see how well we can actually show the arc on camera here. And I'll do my best to describe what's going on. So TIG welding, it's a much more artisanal process, I think, than MIG welding. MIG welding is a very industrial, very brutal process. This is a much more delicate process. You've got to have essentially both hands free, because as you'll see in a bit, we'll be using filler material to fill these welds. But you've got to have a nice stable platform to work on, you've got to be able to see what you're doing. So what's that?
They're asking you to mention cleaning the metal.
See, that's why I didn't that's why I didn't wear the breathing mask. Yes, we'll get to cleaning the metal. So having a good solid base to work from, where you're not holding yourself up, you're not leaning on anything, sitting is very good. Let's talk about metal prep a little bit. We'll get into aluminum in a little bit. Aluminum prep's much more important than steel prep, but you want to have clean metal. You don't want to have any scale on the surface of the metal. With all these steel pieces, I just ran the wire wheel over them, wiped them down with a little bit of acetone. You want to make sure whatever you're wiping them down with is not chlorinated, so no brake clean. This is where we're going to recommend you don't use CRC brake clean. For everything else, it's fine. Put it on Cheerios. It's delicious. But do not use brake clean to clean this. It can produce a dangerous gas, and we'll get sued. So acetone works great. Isopropyl alcohol works good. Just something to get the oils off of here. And prepping it first is basically a matter of getting the scale off the surface. So again, this is a very delicate process. It's something. It's more akin to using a Dremel tool, or using like a prison tattoo gun than it is doing welding. So having a good base, getting a decent pencil type grip on here is fairly important. All right, Chris, let's get booted up here. We'll strike an arc. I'll try and describe to you what is going on when we strike that arc. You ready? All right, so there is our arc. That is essentially what is called plasma. It is a superheated gas, and you can see a very small bubble of molten metal being produced right under that arc. Move to a cleaner spot so we can strike another arc. Oh, I never turned the gas on. All that talk of argon, and I never turned it on. I blame you guys. Well, here's our first good lesson of the night. Here's what happens when you don't have adequate gas coverage. Look at all that soot around the outside of where our puddle was. All that soot is a byproduct of the fact that we did not have a stable atmosphere. We actually had a surprisingly good arc, considering we had a garbage atmosphere around there. But all that soot, which is going to be essentially contamination in the weld, is a byproduct of not having that stable atmosphere to work from. So let's try this again with the argon. We're using about 20 cubic feet a minute of flow for the argon. All right, Chris, here we go. So there's our arc. We can see when the amperage is a little bit lower, the arc likes to wander a little bit. As we increase the amperage, I'm going to roll into the pedal here a little bit. The arc parks itself right down below the electrode and produces that nice molten puddle. And that puddle is what we are going to use to fuse our metal together. So that, at its most basic, is the process of TIG welding. We're using this superheated gas, plasma essentially. Plasma, one of the 5 states of matter. You guys know the 5 states of matter? Solid, liquid, gas, plasma. What's the 5th? Chris, Katie? Nougat. It's actually nougat. So. Yeah. So we're using this superheated gas to focus the heat of that arc on a very specific location in the metal. Unlike MIG welding that puts a lot of heat into the workpiece, TIG welding does not actually it does put a lot of heat into the workpiece, and you have to account for that as you're working with the piece, but it doesn't put the same kind of heat that MIG welding does into the entire workpiece. So you tend to work a lot slower in TIG, but you work a lot more precisely. Let's get caught up with questions here. See if I have missed anything. Very good. Yeah, Autobooks suggests using non-chlorinated brake clean, and there is non-chlorinated brake clean. It's in the green cans. But yeah, basically, don't use anything chlorinated to clean your pieces with, or you will most likely die. And if you die, you can't come back and watch the show next week. Hey, speaking of non-chlorinated brake clean, let's take a quick walk. Oh, actually, speaking of all that stuff, we're going to do a quick edition of What's It Weigh, presented by Intercomp tonight. We got the Corvette here up on the scales. Now the Corvette's been on the scales before. It has never been on the scales in this configuration. This is the exact configuration that it came off track from the 2018 SCCA Time Trial Nationals, where it happened to win the Unlimited 2 class there at the Time Trial Nationals at NCM Motorsports Park. This is just how it came off track. Haven't touched it. It's got about a quarter tank of gas. It's got a set of BF Goodrich R1S tires on 18 by 10.5 inch reproduction Z06 wheels all the way around. Differences from the last time we weighed it: it's got no passenger seat, but it does have an auto power roll bar in there. So we added the roll bar, took out the passenger seat. So if you want to place your bets and make some guesses as to what you think this will weigh, who closest to the pin without going over it, you're going to win a fabulous JRM prize package. You can throw those guesses up on YouTube or on Facebook, and we'll keep an eye on them. At the end of the show, we'll throw this baby down on the scales. Let's, oh, somebody on YouTube just bought the AHP machine. Yeah, so far I'm a fan. Folks, we're gonna get back to this in just a second. Before we do that, let's give a shout out to the folks that make this show possible. Talking about our friends at CRC Industries. You can check them out at crcindustries.com. Even better, go to Harbor Freight, go to Lowe's, go to Home Depot, go to Advanced Auto Parts, go to O'Reilly or Napa, and get some CRC stuff. Throw it in your basket, put it in your car, take it home, use it on your race track, street car, on the hinges, on your gate, wherever you want to use it. I was just using some of their spray white lithium grease to lube our gate the other day because it was squeaking like crazy. Great stuff. We are big fans. They, as it turns out, are fans of ours. They support events like our $2,000 challenge and great stuff we do at the magazine. So by buying that CRC stuff, you're giving a little bit back to this community that we live and work in, this community of amateur and professional motorsports. You're also getting a fantastic product. Also, check out our friends at Autobooks, Aerobooks out there in Burbank. They have thrown up some great suggestions for welding books already tonight. That's the kind of stuff they have there. Ed Iskandarian was in the store the other day. If you can make it out there in person, then yes, absolutely do it. If not, check them out at autobooks-aerobooks.com, and they have tens of thousands of books, magazines, DVDs on everything to do with our hobby. Everything from welding instruction books to shop manuals to photography books. The entire history of cars and motorsports right there in one bookstore. Check them out, autobooks-aerobooks.com. All right, let's get back to it. We got some great guesses coming in on the Corvette. Yeah, oh, Frank Lee says 2894. Frank, thank you, I wish. I'm gonna go ahead and say that you are low already. So yeah, closest without going over. We'll do that at the end of the show. Let's get back to this. Let's talk about actually sticking two pieces of metal together. So we've seen how to create that arc, how to make that plasma field, which creates the puddle, which melts the metal. Now let's talk about sticking two pieces of metal together. So let me get, it's a little hot. Okay, let's get a couple of sample pieces up here. We've scrubbed these off a little bit. We've acetoned them down. We're going to stick these two pieces of, it's like 3/16. I'm going to stick those together. So I'm going to turn the amperage up just a little bit to about 165 amps, maybe 170 amps. And that'll be our full throttle amperage setting. So when we're talking about actually sticking two pieces of metal together, we're going to have to add some metal to make up for what would essentially be a melted valley in between those two pieces of metal. So that's where the filler rod comes in. This is a, which rod is this? This is 70S, and again, this is, people were asking earlier for, you know, give me a generic just work setting. This 70S filler is about as close as you're going to get to generic anything. This is 3/32. So if you're welding anything from, like, honestly, even down to 1/16 of an inch is a little big for 1/16, but you know, anything up to like a 1/4 inch, you can get away with this 3/32 rod. So now we get into discussions of technique, and this is where TIG welding and MIG welding start to diverge quite a bit, because TIG welding, if there's, and again, I'm not terribly experienced at this, but the thing I'm seeing so far is TIG welding takes a lot of patience, it takes a little bit of concentration, and it takes a little bit of touch, and I actually like that more so than MIG welding, which essentially you just figure out what your speed is going to be and you stick with that. I like the fact that I can be very, very patient and actually even change my rate on a TIG weld as I'm working through it. And the few practice welds I've done are not beautiful so far, but I am successfully sticking the metal together. So what we're going to want to do when we're first starting to work on fusing two pieces of metal together is we're going to want to start off by tacking them a little bit, and that's going to give us an idea of how fast it's going to melt, how fast our work pieces are going to melt, how our puddle is going to behave, and so we're a little bit sort of armed with knowledge when we get ready to start putting our filler rod in there. So we're just going to do kind of an eyeball tack on these. We got a few boogers. I'm going to flip my tungsten around here, because after our little adventure with the no gas, it's a little hosed up. So this is why we prepped both sides of our tungsten. So when we do this tack, I'm going to start my arc right here at the corner where these two pieces of metal meet. Let's talk a little bit about how we're holding the torch and why we're holding the torch in a certain way. The ideal way to hold this torch would be 90 degrees straight up and down. You would get excellent gas coverage on your plasma ball. You wouldn't have to worry about the arc wandering too far, but kind of impossible to do just from a spatial perspective. So you're going to want to lean the gun back a little bit, provide a stable base. You can use your finger, you can use another block over here, anything you can do to steady that hand, because what's going to be important while you're creating this and maintaining this plasma arc is your distance between the end of that electrode and that puddle. You want it to stay constant, and you want it to stay essentially as short as possible without getting your tungsten electrode into your puddle. You get that tungsten electrode into your puddle, your tungsten is essentially at that point done until you grind it again. You're gonna have stray arcs going all over the place. You're gonna have secondary arcs trying to start, because that electricity is gonna have different paths to ground, and it's just everything goes to hell at that point. So keep that tungsten out of the puddle, but keep it close. So that's why it's a very delicate procedure. You want 3 or 4 millimeters between the end of that arc and the top of your puddle. So let's just get down to it here, and let's go ahead and tack this. Chris, you ready? So we'll start our arc. We'll throttle it up a little bit. We'll wait for a puddle to form, and we'll work that puddle back and forth a little bit across our gap and that will create a bit of a tack. Now, when we pull out of our arc, when we essentially end our arc, we don't just want to pop right off the throttle. We want to back off that throttle a little bit, and let the arc, let the puddle cool slowly. So we got kind of a half-ass tack on there. It's not horrible. I'm going to do it a little bit more severely. Chris, we're going back in. Actually, I'm going to move this whole thing closer to me. A little bit better tack that time. We actually were, hopefully you guys saw that on the screen. We actually managed to make puddles on both work pieces. The puddles flowed together. As soon as they flowed together, I started backing off on the throttle and let them cool from there. Now we'll tack the other side. Chris, you ready? All right, same thing there. We got a little bit of heat into the piece. As you're making these arcs, especially if you're using a piece that is essentially an ambient temperature workpiece, the physical properties of this piece are going to change as you work it a little bit. So as you get more heat in the piece, more just sort of ambient latent heat, it's going to take less heat to get it up to molten flowing temperature. So the physical properties are going to change as you continue to weld on this thing. That's for me anyway, that's the great thing about TIG welding, is that you can constantly adjust the amount of energy you're putting into this piece just by watching that puddle. So we've got a tack on either end here. Now we're going to start working with our filler material a little bit. I am not qualified to give you actual instruction on the use of this filler material, but I can tell you a couple of sort of general things that I am noticing so far. First off, you want your filler material to be melted by the puddle, not by the arc. So what do we mean by that? Well, hopefully we'll be able to see on camera that as we produce that puddle, as we move that puddle ahead of the TIG electrode, as we move it down the joint, that molten puddle will flow ahead of the joint. We want to put our filler material, boop, boop, boop. You have to make that noise when you do it too. So as you boop, boop, into that joint, you want to make sure that you are essentially melting that filler rod with the puddle and not with the arc itself. What's going to happen if you start getting the arc into the filler into the arc too quickly, where the arc itself is melting the puddle, it's going to melt before it actually hits your workpiece. So you want to try and let the actual puddle do the melting. So let's yeah, what the hell? Let's actually try it. So you guys get to watch me lay one of my hopefully first TIG beads here, and we're just gonna we'll start our arc, we'll get our puddle going, and we'll start dabbing this stuff in here. So as we'll have this kind of motion where we're just kind of going boop 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 and popping it in there as we're moving that puddle down the joint. All right, wish me luck, everybody. Place your wagers. Chris, you ready? Ready. Okay, there's our arc. It's wandering a little bit, so we're going to increase the amperage, get a nice puddle going, and now we can start adding that filler as we move it along the joint. So I got my filler stuck in a little bit too far and stuck my filler to the workpiece. but you can see the general appearance of an actual weld starting to form there, which, considering I've been TIG welding all of about 9 minutes before this, you know what, I'll take that. We can actually look at the back and see that our penetration was coming all the way through the back, actually a little bit aggressively there. So we might want to back. Actually, we'll probably want to move a little bit faster next time. You want to have enough heat where you can achieve full penetration, but not so much heat where you get too much penetration where you've got essentially molten metal falling through the bottom. So you need to get enough heat into your workpiece, or you're not going to get even adequate penetration, which is you know, that's my wedding night basically is what that is. So let's take a little break and we'll let that cool just slightly while we deal with some questions. Cool. I'm glad everybody's actually able to see that. Oh, we got some good guesses coming in. I've seen some that are really close. Charles wants to have a discussion on types of cups. Yes, we will get to that in a little bit. I will discuss that shortly. Brian says I didn't boop. No, I didn't boop, but I was chewing my tongue a little bit. So that counts. And yeah, Greg says a little bit faster and less heat in the actual zone. Yeah, that's the game right there, is matching your speed and your amperage to your thickness. But just based on this so far, I am encouraged. I would actually say that I like this a lot better than MIG welding. I actually like the process that allows you to basically have direct control over what's going on right at the interface of your two workpieces. So let's work this down a little bit further. Oh, somebody mentioned post flow. Let's talk about that a little bit. I stuck my rod to my workpiece, so I backed off the throttle way too fast. Immediately after mentioning that you shouldn't back off the throttle too fast, what happens when you do that is a couple things. First off, backing off the throttle too fast is a great way to create craters at the end of your weld, because you essentially stop putting filler into the puddle. The end of that puddle cools really fast as compared to how the rest of the puddle cooled, and you have essentially a gap in the end of that puddle. So you want to be able to keep adding filler right up until that molten area disappears. So when you're finishing out your weld, come off the throttle slowly, just essentially slow down the entire process, and just have a gradual taper out of it, and actually then hold your torch there a little bit longer while that formerly molten area cures. That's going to keep the argon flowing on it. There's what's called post flow on this machine. Keeps the argon flowing a little bit after you actually finish your weld. So that's going to help that area cure, and it'll be good. What's that, Katie?
Wrap it up and do what's it weigh.
I'm just being boring. Yes. It's 9:50 already?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, let's do one more of these. We'll do some aluminum really quick, and then we'll do what's it weigh. All right, Chris, let's do it. All right, let's get this arc started. We're going to go for throttle up here a little bit quicker and start moving and booping. Boop, 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 boop. Take a look at the back. Yeah, so we can see initially here where we lagged a little bit when we first created our molten puddle, started moving through it, and you can see kind of our heat signature around the outside here, and just the bare hints of penetration coming through the back. I would call that a fairly, that's a you know, a C+, B- novice weld. After I've got, you know, just a few minutes with the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and say that yeah, this is something that even a dumb guy like me can learn fairly quickly. So, and I've already gotten an offer to weld a cage. Let's talk real quickly here about aluminum, and then we'll go on to what's it weigh. Aluminum is, we'll turn our gas off. You're welding aluminum, you're doing essentially the same thing that you're doing with steel. You're creating a molten puddle, you're moving it along, you're adding filler material, but instead of doing it with direct current, you're doing it with alternating current. The reason you're doing it with alternating current is because aluminum, as we've discussed before, has a very, very tough oxide layer on top of it. Aluminum oxide melts at about 3,700 degrees, which is about 3 times the heat required to melt the base metal. So we have to do something to get that oxide layer off of there. What using AC does, where'd my pen go? Coming out of your wall is 60 hertz sine wave AC. So if that's neutral, this is what the electricity coming out of your wall looks like. It's doing that 60 times a second, going from positive to negative. So what this produces is a square wave AC, which looks, instead of having these gradual curves, looks more like that. So it's basically just flipping polarity, and instead of trailing off and going to the opposite polarity, then trailing back on, going to that polarity, it's essentially just instantly flipping polarity from positive to negative. When we are at electrode negative, when the electricity is flowing up from our ground through our workpiece into the electrode, essentially what it's doing is it is blasting off, it's cleaning that layer of aluminum oxide off the top of that aluminum, so that when we reverse polarity and send the energy back into the workpiece and heat it up, we are heating up the base metal and not that aluminum oxide layer. So the key adjustment is going to be 2 things. It's bless you, Katie. It's going to be the frequency, how often this is switching, and it's also going to be what's called the AC balance, which is how much positive, piece of crap pens, how much positive to negative electrode ratio we have. If we're talking about just works settings, you want to start with about a 70-30 balance of 30% electrode negative, where the energy, or sorry, 30% electrode positive, where the energy is flowing into the electrode, where you're actually doing your cleaning action, about 70% of your heat action or your welding action. So setting up for aluminum literally is as easy. We'll turn the gas back on here. It's as easy as switching the machine from DC to AC. All of the everything else related is going to be about the same. We're going to jack up our amperage just a little bit because we're using a little bit thicker aluminum. And we'll just lay a quick bead across the top of this aluminum, and I'll show you kind of what happens. So just like welding aluminum any other way, here's going to be your big differences. Aluminum, when it melts, the window of malleability for aluminum is much smaller than steel. Steel, you can play with that puddle, you can let that puddle flow around, you can kind of work with the puddle dynamically. Aluminum is not quite as forgiving as that. When aluminum starts to melt, it goes from solid to liquid in a very, very small temperature window. So you got to keep an eye on that puddle, because stuff's going to start happening really, really fast. The other thing is, you can blow through aluminum very, very, very quickly as well, and your fill rod takes a much different, not a much different technique, but a considerably different technique than the steel rod, because this fill rod is also going to melt at a much lower temperature and much quicker. So when you get that fill rod in there, you can't slow play it, baby. You got to jam it right in there and get it into that puddle and get it back out. Otherwise, if you're going in there slow, as you go in there, it's just going to melt from the latent heat of that plasma ball. And you know, what's that?
Freezing.
So it's going to melt too early. You're going to get a big booger on the end of your fill rod, and you're going to have to get up and start over again. So let's just get a little puddle going here and move it along, and I'll show you kind of how aluminum works. Chris, you ready? So you're going to notice first off that the sound is going to be a little bit different, and you're going to actually see the cleaning action that takes place. You can see that oxide layer splattering off of there. Now I'm going to increase the amperage a little bit, and we'll see a puddle form. There it goes. So we actually got our puddle to move along there. Now I purposely kind of didn't clean this aluminum as good as I should have to show you how that works, but you could actually see that oxide layer splattering off of there and cleaning itself out. I haven't cleaned this stuff at all, but let's just see if we can get a tack on these, and you'll kind of see how it flows together. All right, Chris, you ready? Do a couple of boops here and see if we can't. So there's 5 or 6 beads. They're not the prettiest things in the world, but you could actually see that puddle forming. And you can see how dirty this aluminum was, how poorly it was cleaned, because it took forever to get that puddle going. But as soon as that oxide layer blasted off the top, that puddle formed really, really quickly. We were able to move it along the workpiece, and we're just having some hints of it coming through the back there. But I think the takeaway message here, as with before, is this is an accessible process to the inexperienced person. I would go so far as to say, if you are somebody who has a fairly steady hand, if you are somebody that likes doing work up close, if you do something like sew or have a lot of experience with soldering, you might be more comfortable with TIG welding than you are with MIG welding. I know that this is going to probably be my go-to welder from here on for stuff. We'll go to the Corvette in just a second here. Oh, let's talk about the cups a little bit. When you're talking about these ceramic cups, you've got a few different options. First off, you have a few different options of sizes. If you're welding thicker metal, you're going to have the ability to put larger or smaller diameter cups on there. Those are going to control the gas flow coming out of the end of that cup. There's also what's called a gas lens, which is a diffuser you can put inside there, which gives you a bit more consistent gas coverage. And there are also clear Pyrex cups available, which make it a little bit easier to see what's going on with the workpiece. Size of the cup is going to be chosen essentially based on thickness of the material. Thicker the material, bigger the cup you want to use, and the more stick out you can use, because you're putting more energy into it. Again, we've started with, like, I think a number 6 cup, number 7 cup. We just wanted to get the most generic settings we possibly could going into all this stuff. Honey Forrest wants to know, do we discuss costs of TIG setups? So this AHP, who did no relation to us, they did not advertisers in the magazine yet, or have anything. I just went to their website, bought this, $720 plus $30 to ship it. So $750 for a AC/DC inverter style TIG. Also does some stick welding, and fired up right out of the box, and they've been great to deal with. Eastwood has machines priced in a similar vein. If you want to go up market a little bit, you can look at somebody like Miller, who for around the $1,100 to $1,200 range has some great TIG setups. This seems to be, I do not feel like I am missing out on anything, given the control and the options that this thing has. If I was a professional welder in a production environment, maybe this wouldn't be the machine for me. As a home gamer, as a hobbyist, somebody that's going to be, welding a roll cage together or doing something like that a few times a year, this seems to be a very nice option. Showed up at my house for $750. Well, Gregory Jones is a fantastic resource, and we appreciate him being here. Thanks for answering so many questions. Greg's talking about 110 volt TIG welders out there. Yeah, you can basically up to anything that can produce up to about 175 amps. You can weld up to about a quarter inch thick material. Some 110s can do that. I always go 220 if you have the ability to go 220. You can get away with 110, but always you're going to be stressing the machinery a lot less if you can run more voltage through. You've got more options at that point. It's a hell of a thing to wish you had opted for the higher powered machine. Yeah, Doug mentions the Harbor Freight Vulcan series. Those have been getting well reviewed. Let's weigh a Corvette, everybody. So let's fire up the Intercomp wireless scales here. Did I leave them on? All right, folks, you know what time it is. It is time to guess the weight of heavy objects for fabulous prizes. Whoever comes closest without going over to guessing the weight of this here 2004 Chevrolet Corvette Z06, you are going to win a fabulous Grassroots Motorsports prize pack from GRM and Intercomp. So get those guesses in. These wireless scales weigh, how many cars did we weigh at the challenge with these scales, Katie? Like close to 30 cars.
50?
Yeah, 40 or 50 cars went over these scales.
We're going from 30 to 50.
Somewhere between 30 and 50 cars went over these scales at the 2018 challenge. And they held up fantastically. We got people making some good guesses here. We're just going to lower this baby onto our scales and see what they say. All right, I think somebody actually might have hit this one on the nose.
I'm kind of scared that he did.
The actual weight of this Chevrolet Corvette Z06 with no passenger seat, but an auto power 4-point roll bar with a Kirky aluminum driver's seat with no carpeting in the back area, with the airbag, the driver's side airbag removed, and a steering wheel put in its place, is 3,066 pounds.
Oh. Jeremy Scotton, because it's the closest without going over.
Oh my God! So
Danny Cow and Dinesh Ramazar should be mentioned because they were 1 pound over.
okay, so yeah, Danny and Dinesh at 30.67. You guys were 1 pound over. So using our Price is Right rules, who was the winner, Katie?
Jeremy Scotton.
Jeremy Scotton. You
3,050 pounds.
at 3,050 pounds. You weren't even the closest, but because Bob Barker said it is so, you are the winner of tonight's What's It Weigh, presented by our friends at Intercomp. Jeremy, send us a PM at the Grassroots Motorsports Facebook account, and we will get your prize package on the way. Let me. Oh boy, we got a lot. Everybody was really close. I saw a couple of 2,800 and change, which are realistic if aggressive. And
Dinesh, that we took the grilled cheese out from under the seat. That's really what lost that last pound.
yeah, Dinesh and Danny, you guys lost by one grilled cheese. Actually, if my garage door opener was still in there, you guys would probably get it. Folks, that is the show tonight. Thank you for coming along on this journey. Thank you for indulging me in this experiment to see if this was a worthwhile thing. And I think we have if not proved, at least sort of lended credence to the fact that yes, you too, sir or madam, are capable of TIG welding right in your very garage. I am a fantastic yardstick because I am basically a 4th grade educated, emotionally stunted man-child, and if I can do it, certainly you would be much better at it than I am. So I'm encouraged. I've got a lot of scrap pieces cut that I will be playing with over the next few days and honing my skills, and maybe we'll see this thing on the show again. And kudos to the gang at AHP. We're definitely going to be contacting them, trying to sell them an ad. Thanks to all the folks on YouTube that joined us tonight. We appreciate it, you guys. Please go down and subscribe to our channel. You get first crack at all of our great content. If you're watching us on Facebook tonight, thanks for hanging out. And next week, we're working on a couple of different things next week. By the end of this week, we will be able to announce that for sure, what's going on next week. Thanksgiving week is probably just going to be me hanging out and eating some turkey, and maybe we'll bring you guys along and have turkey sandwiches after that. The week after Thanksgiving, Andrew Rains from Apex Pro data acquisition device is going to be here. We'll be talking about the Apex Pro. It is essentially a driving coach in a box. It is a very cool little data acquisition thing. It's only a couple $100, mounts right on your dash, interfaces with your phone. Very handy for track, autocross, all kinds of stuff, lots of cool features. He'll be here talking about that, and we've got lots of great stuff lined up after that, so we really appreciate it. Oh my God, yes, and Katie posted the free sticker link. If you want free stickers, you guys didn't see this on YouTube. If you want free Grassroots Motorsports stickers, because she cares about you more than me, go to grassrootsmotorsports.com/free stickers. So if you're watching on YouTube over there, you want a couple of free GRM stickers, grassrootsmotorsports.com/free stickers. We'll send you a couple of stickers just for watching the show. And what are you flapping around over there about?
I tried to post the links to more helpful welding things, and my computer freaked out.
Okay, we got. Let me just give some shout outs here to all the people that I was watching do this. Chuck E 2009, fantastic YouTube resource. The Fabrication series, another great YouTube resource. We'll throw up links to all this stuff. And you got it, Katie? Katie's throwing up the links to basically the videos that we watched in the Facebook chat. So yeah, Chuck E 2009, weld.com, and the Fabrication series, all great YouTube channels. Just go there and spend a bunch of time watching those, and that's literally, that allowed me to do this out of the box with very little practice. Folks, that is it. I'm going to give one more shout out to the people that make this show possible. I'm talking about our good friends at CRC Industries. We have been huge fans of theirs just as long as they have been fans of ours, maybe longer. This shelf is full of CRC stuff. Actually, I'm having to move stuff forward and put old cans in here because I'm using it faster than I can replenish it. That's what fans we are. If you're at Lowe's or Home Depot or Harbor Freight or Advanced Auto Parts or Napa or O'Reilly, if you're at any place that sells automotive chemicals, you're getting this CRC stuff, you are getting a great product, but you are helping support great shows like this one, awesome race teams, great events like our $2,000 challenge, and the entire world of amateur and professional motorsports. They're a great company that gives a little bit back to this scene, so please do what you can to support them. Also, we have seen many of the great welding books available from these folks at Auto Books, Aero Books tonight. Jerry has been good enough to post some great links to great resources, which I'm going to take advantage of as I continue my journey into TIG welding. Check them out online at autobooks-aerobooks.com. Even better if you're out on the West Coast, check them out in person right there in Burbank. You might meet a famous author. You might see some awesome cars during one of their car shows or cruise-ins or cars and coffee events. But I guarantee you, if nothing else, you'll be able to get some great books, magazines, materials, collectibles, all kinds of cool stuff. autobooks-aerobooks.com. That's it, folks. We'll see you again next week. Big thanks to Katie back there working the boards. Big thanks to Chris, who did not get... one thing I didn't mention, always wear long sleeves because TIG welding puts off hella UV and you don't want to get sunburned. So we made Chris, our camera guy, wear sleeves tonight, and he complied. And good job at not blowing out our sensor tonight. So thank you very much for the entire staff of Grassroots Motorsports, for Chris and Katie and everybody else at GRM Live. I'm JG Pasterjack. You are the finest audience in the world. We'll see you again next Wednesday. Good night, everybody.